Well, as I said, when we're looking at hiring, there should be an employee handbook, and it should be made available to all the employees at the time of the hire. Promotion policies that are talked about should be evaluated as being fair and equitable and understood by the employees. And remember, we're talking about the purpose of an auditor, right? The things as auditors that we're going to look at, if part of what we're looking at is the IS management. We should be looking at training. It should be provided on a regular basis to all the employees. We want to look at scheduling and time reporting. Many companies, believe it or not, even though they're on salary, still have to do a time card every day so that they can turn in the time card about how many hours that they've worked. And so, that's something that may be required. We want to know, what is that process? What is scheduling? Lots of companies, I've done a lot of work at service providers, and it's always fun, to be working in the daytime with third shift because they're half asleep because they're used to working all night. But you want to evaluate those things like scheduling as well. The process they use for employee performance evaluations. You also want to check to see that they have this issue called required vacations. By the way, required vacations are very important. Some of the motivation companies use for required vacations is sort of this: you can accumulate so much vacation, and if you don't use it, you lose it. All right, so what they're, I think, trying to tell us in a nice way is at least every 2 years or whatever the time period is, you've got to go on vacation. Even if you don't go anywhere, you can have a staycation as long as you're not at work. A lot of these types of policies, and we're going to talk about a few other human resource policies, are designed to help in the detections of fraud and other abuses. I can use the example of a bank manager who never goes on vacation. And so the bank says, you know what, you've got to go on vacation. You're gone, take 2 weeks, you're going to lose it if you don't. We have to get it off our books, or it could just be a policy that says you will go on vacation. Meanwhile, somebody's going to step in for that management position during those 2 weeks. And it's useful because a fill-in person can start to notice over that time signs of irregularities or frauds or other abuses that might have been going on. And so, what you're doing is you're getting that extra set of eyes to kind of be that double check to help, lower the risk that you see as a company. So suddenly, required vacations comes back into risk management. And of course, you have to have termination policies. Termination policies are something everybody needs to know, how they work, what they expect, what they're required to turn back in, all those types of expectations. I know in the hometown that I'm in, there's a chip manufacturing corporation there, and their termination policy was pretty simple. The day you gave 2 weeks notice was your last day, and everybody knew that. They did the 2 week notice because, they thought that it'd be nice, but they all knew that once they turned in that 2 week notice letter, that, they would have security at their desk, helping them pack up their stuff, turning in their cards, giving them the parking pass, and they would be escorted out the building. The philosophy that they had, and again, it's back to risk management, was once they know you're really no longer invested in that corporation, they are not certain about your loyalties. And, in the chip manufacturing world, there's a lot of internal secrets. And so it was just their policy to go ahead and make that your last day and, help you on the way out the door for the purpose of protecting their information assets. Nothing wrong with that as a policy. Like I said, everybody pretty much knew that's what the policy was going to be. And so, that's how they changed their jobs. They said, I'll start this company in 2 weeks. Or they would just say, well, I'll start for you tomorrow. I'll just put in my 2 week notice and they'll let me go that day. All right. So again, these are parts of what we look at as we're looking at, why do we care? Hopefully I've given you some examples for each of these targets about why we care and what we're looking for. And of course here we were just kind of focusing on things like hiring practices, and I kind of got you through the termination policies and all these other things that we're going to evaluate in the overall IS management. One of the other things we have to look at in IS management is the sourcing practices. Now, it's tough to say just sourcing because I want to say insourcing or outsourcing, but it's still a sourcing practice, and it's it relates to the way in which our organization can obtain the IS functions that we need to be able to support the business that we are trying to support, right, the organization. The sourcing strategy considers each IS function to determine what approach that they should follow, and the options that we have in sourcing is either it's in-sourced, meaning our employees are taking care of this particular function, or we've outsourced it, so that means we've hired another service agency or other people or contractors to do this function for us, or it can be a hybrid where it's a combination of those types. Recently, I saw a hybrid at a governmental facility in the last couple of weeks, where we were actually doing training on some of their infrastructure machines and devices, and they were a combination of government employees, insourced, as well as a bunch of people that were contractors. I mean, that was the only job they did. They might as well have been full-time, but they're considered outsourced, but they were working full-time for them. But, technically they were contractors brought in to help the internal insourced people working, and that was kind of a hybrid model. Now, your sourcing policies should evaluate the IS functions to determine the best method of delivery. And some of the considerations about that is, number one, you ask the question, is it an IS core function? If it is a core function, what's the best delivery? Should it be insourced, outsourced, or some sort of hybrid? And, you have to think about this. You have to say, well, if it's a really important function, that might be something I would not want to trust to an outsourced location. But then again, it might be something you purposely outsource. Here in a couple of weeks, I'm going to go to a bank, a large nationwide bank. And I understand that even though the bank's in charge of the decisions of the type of infrastructure they want, the people that actually run it work for another company contracted to the bank. And I've seen this model many times. A hospital I worked at, installing some Cisco gear, at least I can be a little more specific about that. Technically, they used to be hospital employees, and the hospital instead contracted with a new service provider to support the core function of their network. But that company then just hired basically the old staff, so they were still working in the same building, doing the same job they were doing before, but they were no longer employed by the hospital. They were employed by this third party. So that might be a best method. For the hospital, that type of a design worked out well, because what happened is for just a little bit more money that they were paying otherwise, for wages and compensation packages, for a little bit more on top of that, they were getting this other company to bring in new equipment, new gear, stuff they couldn't afford on their own. And so not only did they still have their core function, the same people, but they got new equipment that they were able to bring in kind of in a way like they were financing it over time by contracting with this company. So that worked for them. Again, and I'm trying to give you examples of things that you would look at when you're auditing. Another decision or determination might be on IS specific knowledge. Specific knowledge. So if I'm going to bring in this high-end XYZ super ultra firewall with intrusion detection systems and AV scanning and WebSense and this beautiful web GUI and all this really cool stuff, all these bells and whistles, I might not have the processors or staff that I need to meet the goals and objectives of working with this specific knowledge. And so it might be, right, so if it is specific knowledge, I should say, or a specific process, a high-end process, or if I just don't have the staff I need, I might consider the outsourcing. Another determination we have is whether or not the function can be performed by a third party for the same or a lower price. Well, kind of that hospital story I was talking about was technically a little bit higher price. But if they considered the actual cost of the equipment they were getting and the maintenance of that equipment, right, it was actually a lower price than had they tried to do that individually, buy the new equipment and keep their old staff. So that's another part of the determination. And of course, you should ask, does your IS team have experience in working with third parties? Sometimes those relationships are good, sometimes they're not. I know that because I'm always the outsource. As a contractor / consultant, I go into some companies and they love to see me there. And I go into other companies and I get oh, you're the contractor. And it's fun. It's, what is their experience? Maybe, the last one had experience with contractors and might just not have been good the last time. But that's something else you need to evaluate.